You know, one of my favorite sites online is Reddit, which also happens to be a community. One of the things I like about Reddit that they do is the too long didn't read. So for those of you who don't know, when someone puts up a long post, they'll do a quick summary, add some context of the most important things. So I'm going to do that for my presentation, after which you guys are free to leave. So we think that brands need a better approach to top of funnel engagement. And the reason is that most content marketing kind of sucks. I think when you look at it, it really does lack authenticity. We think also, just in general, we've kind of hit peak content, and I'll talk about what that means. I really believe that people would rather interact with the experts or the kind of domain experts, the stakeholders at companies, as opposed to just interacting with the marketing team. So we think there's a real opportunity for brands to become content DJs, for them to facilitate collaboration around content, and ultimately to build their own communities. And so we'll talk about what that looks like. So the ability to sell yourself or your company or your product, depends a lot on the level of trust and credibility that you have within a community. And the truth is that there's probably not a better way to achieve this than publishing. Right? Content is an amazing catalyst to engagement, to build relationships. It encapsulates ideas, knowledge, opinions, and innovation. But there is a problem, right? And it's actually it's an economics problem, and it really comes down to supply and demand. The rate of content creation has continued to grow exponentially. There was this quote from a couple of years ago where every 2 days, we now create as much content or as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization up until 2003. Right? Like think about that. That's amazing. Thousands and thousands of years of information and data is now being created every 2 days. Or this one, 300 hours of video being uploaded to YouTube every minute. So all this to kind of say that, we're at this peak content. It's very saturated. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm often trying to figure out, I have a limited amount of time. How do I find what content I want to spend my time consuming, right? Because there's so much of it out there. And it really creates this signal versus noise dilemma, right? It's so noisy out there. It's, whether you're on one of the social channels, wherever you are, your email. And I think content marketing has really incentivized a lot of the wrong behavior when it comes to this, right? A lot of content just for content's sake, a lot of Me Too content. When really at the end of the day, how do you put your experts at the forefront, right? Not necessarily the marketing team. The marketing team is incredibly important. Most of our customers are marketers, but it's about facilitating how do we enable our experts to have a presence in these communities. I had this really interesting conversation with the head of marketing at Nvidia. And he goes, look, there's two types of people that buy Nvidia graphics cards, right? People who just go and buy a computer and it just happens that Nvidia is the graphic card in the computer they bought. Or people who are looking to try and take performance off the CPU and move it onto the GPU. So these are data scientists, geospatial engineers. And he said, my dilemma is, our marketing team doesn't know what the most interesting new algorithm or fast Fourier transform that's been developed, what this audience is going to care about. The people in our company who do know are the engineers. And so how do I help them surface the content for a marketing team to be sharing with that audience? Because it is hard to get non-content people to participate. If anyone here is in marketing, I'm sure, around the table you're sitting there going, hey, we need our CEO or head of engineering, our chief digital officer. How do we get them creating and sharing more content? It's not easy. But I can tell you there's a huge opportunity for businesses that are successful in enabling expert insight and context around content. And I think this quote from Gary Vaynerchuk is great, right? Content is king, but context is God. So this is really where this idea of a content DJ comes in. It's not always about more content. It's about content that exists. How can these brands or experts, filter out, curate what they think is the most interesting content around that topic, and then add some context or some insight to that specific piece. So very much so, like a DJ creating a playlist, these are brands or individuals within a brand creating a playlist of content around a topic. I think collaboration internally, right? So content shouldn't just be siloed in marketing, right? How do you get the other teams within your company participating around sharing and discussing interesting content, as well, both internally and externally, right? So involving your advocates, your partners in this. I think open source is an amazing thing to look to, right? So there's probably not been something that's been more impactful for anyone trying to build a tech startup than the open source community. Just about every single product you use or anyone building a startup today is leveraging open source technologies. And within that, there's this company called GitHub, which is an online platform. They've done incredible things at facilitating that collaboration. So it's an online platform where people can contribute together, build code, collaborate around it. We use it at Presley. But what's interesting, all of our developers also have their own public open source profile, right? And I think that's something that GitHub does very well. It really is about empowering everyone, but also giving a presence to incentivize them to participate, right? New York Times had this thing about why do people share? And people share because they want recognition, they want to build relationships, they want that presence. And so I think it's just as important whether it's your developers in the open source community or it's the engineers in your company sharing interesting content. It's not about hiding them and just having everything from the brand face. It's actually giving the room for these people to be at the forefront. I think this is a great example. So this is a good example of a brand being a content DJ. It's the Mattermark newsletter. Anyone who's in startup or tech, it's a great thing to subscribe to. And every day, they pick the 5 best pieces of content from the investment side and the 5 best pieces of content from the entrepreneur side. And they add a little bit of context around it, description why they think you should spend time reading it. It's my favorite newsletter I get on a regular basis. And every once in a while, they'll pull in, an original piece of content. So it's probably like a 95 third party, 5% their own, but it's very authentic and it's quite valuable. So I guess, is that it? All you got to do is just get people in your company sharing, curating content. Well, no, because, ultimately the community also needs people outside the company. And so figuring out distribution, figuring out engagement are important things, right? Because ultimately engagement with this content that this brand is going to build, this community, if you're not actually engaging anyone, it's all for nothing, right? So the engagement leads to the relationships, which then lead to the leads and the revenue. So I think a lot of brands we talk to on social, we're starting to see a lot less organic traffic, organic eyeballs. It's becoming much more expensive to get in front of people on these different social platforms. At the same time, I think it's also becoming really difficult to convert on those platforms. So we really believe brands should be building their own communities, both internal, as I mentioned, to elevate the experts within, but external in terms of involving, your audience, your prospects, your influencers. And it's not about, you will not have as many people coming to your brand community as Facebook has. It's not about that. It's about the people you do tether back to your community are the ones you really care about, because they're the ones that are passionate about the subject. They're the ones that are engaging with your company. And so John Battelle, he's the founder of Wired and Federated Media. He has this great post, I suggest everyone reading it, about own versus rent. And so he really cautions brands at the risk of building all your engagement on real estate you don't own, right? It's like building a house on property that's not yours, right? Because ultimately you don't own that customer relationship. Social continues to get more expensive, so you don't really know. So he also doesn't believe, like we do, that the world is going to be made up of 3 websites: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, right? Brands are still going to have real estate online, so it's really important, we think, to be building that engagement on something that you have. Now, it's not about ignoring those channels, you still need to leverage them, but you're leveraging them for distribution with the goal of tethering that engagement back to a destination that you own. And there's a lot of benefits with that, obviously, right? Data, insights, understanding what content is resonating, who's reading it. Brand association can be much stronger when it's on your own platform. SEO. And one of the big ones in my mind is email, right? Email is still the most powerful channel for the vast majority of our clients. And if you're just doing all the engagement on social, it's not making it easy to capture that very valuable thing in the email. So some pretty good examples online. I think the gold standard is Amex Open Forum. It's all for small business, so actually it may be of interest to people here. They have a lot of influencers in the space contributing to it, members in the community. General Electric, really interesting thing from the head of marketing there. They were only doing social content pushes. And the new head of marketing came in, he said, we're completely changing this because we're not capturing any emails. We didn't have an email newsletter being built. So they went and built this social hub to try and do that. My personal favorite, probably because it's being built on top of Presley, but was what Deloitte's doing. So, Deloitte has this goal of we want to get in front of the conversation around wearable tech, fintech, AR, and it's really cool what they're doing. So on exponentials.xyz, they have over 80 collaborators, none of them in marketing. These are all the domain experts, curating, adding context, adding value to the different verticals that they care about, right? So they've even grown that beyond just Deloitte employees. They now have, people like Anthony Diorio, who's the co-founder of Ethereum, which is a new cryptocurrency. He's contributing to that section as well. So it just adds a lot of credibility, a lot of authenticity, and a lot of value for those people who are looking to get in front of, because basically they're saying, our experts are identifying for you, in their minds, here's the top 10 pieces of content today about wearable tech. And, it's more honest because it's not just 10 articles from Deloitte, right, or 10 articles from that individual. And I can tell you this is now the top performing online digital property for Deloitte in terms of time spent and return visitors. So they've been pretty excited, and they're launching a whole bunch more things like this, but it's just a really good way of giving presence to the experts who aren't typically involved in content to engage with an audience. So, this whole idea of a brand community, it's not new. We haven't invented this. A lot of people call it, maybe a microsite. But I can tell you, I think it's a really good time now for brands and businesses to be investing in this, really for two reasons. One, as I kind of mentioned, social is just getting more and more difficult and expensive as a channel for distribution and engagement. But the second, and I think it's the more important one, is there's just so much content out there that people do want to find valuable resources that are a very specific, very narrow community to go and learn and engage around. I think it also really lowers the inertia or the apprehension for people to share and post into a community when it's all of Facebook or all of LinkedIn. It's a little bit more intimidating versus, hey, this is a community that actually cares about what we're talking about here. So just to kind of quickly recap, start empowering a community both within your organization, so getting everyone sharing around content as well as external. Give those people a presence, right? That's what's going to incentivize them to want to continue sharing and to really take ownership. Provide value through original content creation. I'm not saying that's not important. It's incredibly important. But alongside that, be curating and adding. It's not just about sharing a link. It's about giving some insight or context as to why you should go and spend your time watching this video or this article. Leveraging all the channels, so email, social, SEO, and then, as much as you can, tether that engagement back to a destination that you own as a brand. So that's that.